the dog can come through.
Perfect for testing audio.
Yeah. Oh, wow. There's my audio input capture going up. Now the question is, now we need someone to go and look on YouTube because I can't tell. I got too many wires. Let's figure out what URL this thing is pointing me to.
Yeah, I can go test on YouTube.
It's WordCamp Miami's YouTube channel.
Okay.
It should be a live feed now with a delay. And you should be hearing my voice at some point, even with the delay. Someone says the audio is good. Is that you?
Not me.
Not me.
So somebody named Flipback said the audio is good. So I'm trusting someone who is named Flipback. So I'm not sure.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, the YouTube experience right now is not very good. I don't even have like I'm broadcasting live in their software. And I don't see an easy link that allows me to tell you where.
All right, so welcome to the South Florida.
What was that?
That was you from a different video. I was trying to find the live stream. It said live stream, but it must have been an old video.
Oh, good, because I thought I thought I'd have to take my medication.
No, that was you from the past.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm still looking for.
It's funny watching. Apparently my live is a couple of seconds off.
But are you hearing my voice?
Yes.
Does it sound echoey? I'm going to drop this in chat and YouTube, Zoom chat.
No, your audio is good.
And you can hear yourself?
It's funny watching. Apparently my live is a couple of seconds off.
The answer to that now is yes.
That is correct. So I was worried about breaking the space-time continuum with some sort of endless, infinite loop.
This is how my mind actually works. So I'm actually going to put something out right now. Got to do the social. Now, can you watch for Beth? Because she said she was going to run a little close to the wall here.
Yeah, can you make sure you're an administrator?
Oh, that would be helpful. Let's see. Is co-host the same thing?
Probably.
I'm going to make Nick a co-host too.
Ooh, do I want that responsibility?
I think it has something to do with like you can only assign screen shares to hosts or something.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Something like that anyway. I think I hear my own voice echoing because I am in two places at once with my audio. This is probably the most exciting live stream I've ever done. Wasn't your wedding live stream? Shut up. Okay, hopefully that did it. All right, so okay, Flipback, I see you in the chat. I wasn't intending on monitoring chat for YouTube, so I might be ignoring that a little bit. I'm going to place the tweet I just did in both chats, and maybe we can spread the word a little bit.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. To my small following, I will post that.
Well, you're doing us the honor of speaking. The least we can do is try to get you out there. Somebody has a high pitch sound coming from one of the microphones. My microphone is continuously on. Let me see if I can turn it off for a second. Okay, I'm turning my mic back on. I don't know if that helped any. Fortunately, my mic's not going to be on for continuous. Hey, Esther, how you doing? Oh, she's still connecting to audio. Hi, Esther, how you doing?
Hello. How's everybody? Long time no see.
Yeah, tell me about it. Good to see your face, though.
It's okay. I've been seeing too many people this past week, so. But I miss you guys.
My kids have been going to school, and I've seen too many parents that don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you... I don't know how many times I can do this, but I always like backups. So I'm going to make you co-host, Esther.
Okay.
Sorry, I've been talking to Eddie.
That's okay. Etty's good.
Just in case there's a problem, moderation issue, whatever. No pressure on you, but I like having a few backups just in case.
Okay. Sounds good. Oh, it looked like Guy is frozen.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge monitoring both YouTube and this. So by the way, we are broadcasting live on YouTube as well. Just in case our Zoom room filled up. It probably won't, but I decided to make life more complicated for myself.
Well, that's cool.
I placed the tweet in the Zoom chat if you want to help, but I think everybody's probably aware. You're either aware of it now or you're not. Still no sign of Beth yet. So, Nick, you might be going first.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, given that, how much time do you want me to talk?
How much time were you planning?
Well, you mentioned 30 in the email, so I was trying. I cut a ton of slides.
I didn't necessarily want that, but yeah, I mean, it depends.
I can talk for a very long time, so that's why I want to make sure we give. If I'm going first, I want to make sure we give Beth plenty of time as well.
Well, the less jibber jabber we talk about in the beginning, the faster we can get to things here. The only thing that I'm trying to brainstorm right now is that our trivia game system is not going to work unless it's like less than 10 people playing. So I'm trying to figure out a way for people to narrow down the... Anyway, I'm trying to narrow things down a little bit, which I will try to come up with a solution later. We usually do a dry t-shirt contest first, And then
Do you want to admit the people in?
I was not yet. I was trying to see if
Not
Beth
yet.
was going to be here, but
Okay.
Beth said she was going to be right before the. Do you see Beth anywhere in there, our second speaker?
No.
Okay, well, Esther, your job is to keep a lookout for our second speaker. She did email me and she did say she was going to be a little bit late, but she said she was going to be here before the thing started for testing too. So my guess is that traffic was probably too much.
Okay.
Keep an eye out for her, and whether if she obviously by then now everybody's going to be admitted in a few minutes anyway, and just reach out to her, make sure she's okay, and you can text me or ping me and make sure that let me know when she's in because I'm going to be distracted.
Okay.
So so yeah, 30. So you say it's around 30 minutes now, sir?
It can be longer. I'm going to try and keep it. I'm going to speak quickly to get it to 30, but it can be longer if we would like it to be longer.
Well, so far our second speaker isn't here, so that's all I can say.
So it can
But
be
she
longer.
will be. She will be, though.
Okay.
I do believe her, and I'm not just saying that because it's recorded.
Well, in case something does happen, it can be longer, and there's a demo that I can add to it to make it even longer. So.
All right. So mixture of it's developer talk, but it's everybody friendly, right? Because we just
Yeah, I mean, the first part of it was I'm trying to make it very.
It's okay. Whatever
Friendly
it is, it is. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm just making sure I'm introducing it correctly. Guy, are you ready? Because I'm about to let people in. Is he still here? I wonder if changing this is going to affect the live stream. Yep, it does. Keep it on speaker. All right, one final check for Beth here. Yep, she's here.
Okay.
Let's see if we can do this real quick. Hey, Beth. Can you hear me? Beth?
Sorry, I cut it a little more close than I intended,
No
but I'm
problem.
here.
Let's test our stuff right now. Then we're going to let everybody in.
Okay.
So do you share whatever slides or whatever you got going for you. And we'll
Okay,
confirm
hold
we
on
can
one
see it.
second. One moment.
You're also recording and going out on live stream as we speak. So watch what you say.
Okay. I'll try not to use cuss words or anything.
I was more concerned about other things, but sure, let's go with that.
Oh gosh, I've got the presenter view backwards from the, hold on one second. Sorry. View.
So right now we have at least one person watching us on YouTube right now.
Okay, great. Just one moment. I'm almost there.
Flipback says hi. I don't know who Flipback is. I forget.
Okay. Let's try this again. Perfect. Okay, now let me go over to Zoom and share.
Let me make sure you have credentials. Well, I guess you do now. All right. That works.
And,
I see it.
okay. And my little Zoom thing is in the way. Let me move it. All right. And run that presentation.
Yeah, because we're going to be probably starting pretty quick.
Now you're seeing the full screen, correct?
I am, yeah.
Yes.
What I planned and what happened?
Okay, I'm admitting people.
Okay.
Like an insane asylum or something. So Esther, can you just keep letting people in and just keep an eye on things there? Okay. You can hear the sound of my voice. That means things are working. Welcome to the WordPress Mega Meetup. We're letting in people now, so we're going to give people another few minutes to get in. While you are getting settled, pour yourself a nice, comfortable beverage. Add or remove any articles of shirts you want, because we have a dry t-shirt contest where if you have a WordPress t-shirt, don't turn on the video, put the shirt on, then turn on the video. And then we would love to see you take a photo and share it on Twitter for a chance to win a prize from GoDaddy, which I believe is a gift certificate once again this month. Guy, how do you pronounce your last name? I haven't had to speak it.
Cicinelli.
Cicinelli. So Guy Cicinelli and me, David Bissett, will be your co-hosts for this evening. We have some great things to go over with 2 excellent talks. We're just waiting for people to come in now. So I'm going to go ahead and remind you, if you do have a t-shirt, feel free to WordPress t-shirt. Take a picture of yourself as a selfie, and I am going to give you in Zoom chat the hashtag on Twitter. It's very easy. It's just WP Mega Meetup for a chance to randomly win a GoDaddy gift certificate. Or it's a gift certificate given by GoDaddy. It's one of those two. I think it's the GoDaddy is the one giving, and I think it's an Amazon gift certificate, but don't shoot me.
I won that a couple of months ago, and it was fabulous.
Recording in progress.
So what was it? Was it a GoDaddy gift certificate, or was it a gift certificate from GoDaddy?
No, it was an Amazon gift certificate from GoDaddy.
Well, there you go. Okay, let's see. Now, if Zoom gets too full, or you prefer YouTube, we have a YouTube link, I think, in the chat, don't we? At the very top? Yes, at the very top of the chat. While you're here, why don't you go ahead, people of the world, go ahead where you're from in the Zoom chat, if you're participating in Zoom. If you're still that one person in the Zoom or in the YouTube that's on a delay, feel free to do that as well. Why not? Let's see who we got here. We got Seattle, Boynton Beach, South Carolina, Colorado, South Carolina, Miami, Port St. Lucie. Where's Fort Lauderdale? I don't know. New Hampshire, New Jersey, Los Angeles. Wow. North Hollywood.
Nick Diego, you're from Charleston?
Yeah, I am.
I'm originally from Mount Pleasant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, my daughter lives in Mount Pleasant now.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I love Charleston.
It's a unique environment.
It is, that's for sure.
I can't live there now because it's too humid.
It's very humid. Yeah,
It messes with my hair.
Yeah, it's bad.
Okay. So we are going to keep this one pretty straightforward this evening. We're going to be focusing on the 2 talks that we were pre-announced. If you want to ask questions to the speakers, we are going to do a question and answer after each talk. So we're going to have a talk, Q&A, a little bit of Q&A, another talk, a little bit of Q&A, and maybe give out a prize or 2 at the end depending on how creative I can get. You want to put in the Zoom chat. Zoom chat probably is the only place where we're going to be able to monitor questions. Guy is going to be able to monitor those questions. And I want everyone to put with their question, the word question, colon, actually, was it Q, right? Q is still. So just like I put in the chat now, Q colon, and then your question. That's how we like your questions to be sent over Zoom chat. That would be great. And then Guy is going to collect them as the speaker speaks. And at the end, we're going to read off as many as we can as time allows. Oh, but hey, Pata, how you doing? Are you here for the dev talk? You're here for the dev talk. He's either that or the pizza, and he's going to be disappointed if it's the second. Okay, I think we've given us our fans the necessary 10 minutes intro here, or waiting space. So let me talk quickly because I don't like to see my face on a screen. Hello, welcome to the WordPress Mega Meetup. My name is David Bissett, broadcasting from South Florida right now. You can follow what's happening tonight at my Twitter, because it's the default at Dimension Media, but also WordCamp Miami Twitter as well. We have broadcasted a YouTube link and a tweet. If you scroll all the way to the top of the chat in Zoom, if you're in Zoom, feel free to retweet that tweet. And if anybody needs that YouTube link for the live stream outside of Zoom, in case we get full in the Zoom, feel free to distribute that or help us get that out as well. My co-host is Guy. Let's see if I can do a really cool switch over here. Oh, Guy, you're not on the screen. I don't know why you're not on the screen. But say hi, Guy. Maybe Guy was imagined in my head. It's possible. Okay, there's somebody named Guy, I swear, and he's in this Zoom. I swear again. So he'll be the one taking, as I mentioned, taking the questions that you'll be placing in Zoom. Hi, Guy. Yes. Unless Guy, I really don't see him here. I really hope he hasn't suffered any. It's 2021. Hopefully he doesn't assume any medical problems here. All right. So let's get started. Again, just as a reminder, if you want to take a picture of yourself wearing a WordCamp or WordPress t-shirt, post it on Twitter. The hashtag is WP Mega Meetup. WP Mega Meetup. We might be able to give you a prize. And if you've won something in the last 2 months, you're not eligible to win, says GoDaddy. So, great hosting, restrictive prize winning rules. Okay, so let's jump right to the talks. Our first talk is going to be given, oh wait, let me pull up I got a thing all set up ready to go. My internet's suffering. Unpin. All right, there she is. Just took me a second to get that. Hi, Beth. How you doing? So this is Beth Livingston. I'll let her to do her own introduction beyond that. The first talk tonight has been given by her, and her talk is 6 proven best practices to make your WordPress projects run more smoothly. So Beth, take it away.
Okay, so everybody's seeing my screen now. Is that right?
We're seeing you. Yes.
Okay. I shared my screen.
Yes, and I know let's see if we there we go. Now we got it.
Okay. All right. So thank you.
To see you too, or just the slides?
Either way, I don't care. I'm not vain one way or the other.
Okay. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm leaving it alone. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. So so people are saying in the chat they see the slides and me, which is fine. That's fine. But I have notes, so I might not be looking directly at you at the camera, but I do have notes.
Beth, I've been married for 13 years. I'm used to it.
Okay. All right, so the graphic on my title slide is kind of an indication I have of sometimes how our projects go, right? We plan these great things, but then stuff happens. Or, another word that we use for stuff happens. So yeah, thank you for coming. This is 6 proven best practices to make your WordPress projects run more smoothly. And for those who don't know me, I spent 25, actually it's more like 30 years plus now as an IT business analyst and project manager. I have a master's degree in instructional design. I'm a WordPress agency owner. I'm director of the WP Project Managers Academy, and I recently lost 60 pounds, and that's why I have this picture on this slide because I'm kind of proud of that. David hasn't seen me since I was very heavy. But this is what I look like now, David. Next time I'm in Miami, I'll have to stop by to see you.
It's not a good idea to judge your progress of weight loss based upon the last time I've seen anybody. That's
was a long time ago. That's true. That's true.
Yes.
Most people gained weight during COVID. I happened to go crazy and then lost the weight. But anyway, thank you. But before we get started, in the chat, just tell me, what are the problems you are struggling with from this list? Getting the requirements right, scope creep, getting content from the client on time. These are really common. Overall client management. The project takes longer than you planned. The project costs more than you planned. Getting paid for all you do. We tend to give things away when we shouldn't. Getting client approvals and payment. So somebody wrote in very tall caps letters, takes longer. Right. But you know what? You're not alone. Don't worry. Everybody suffers, even the gurus and the people that have been doing this for a long time suffer from these problems. But I'm going to help you overcome whichever one of those that you are struggling with. But let's get started with some definitions. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because there's a lot of content here to cover. The first part, I'm going to go really fast and I'm going to slow down a little bit, but it's still, I talk very fast, but I'm going to also give you a way at the end how you can learn more and get a copy of the slide deck as well. So let's start with some definitions. What is project success? Most experts agree that project success is getting projects completed on time, within budget, with a quality outcome. Sounds pretty simple, right? But then what is WordPress project success? Well, that is not only on time, within budget, but it's with features that meet the client's business requirements. But the most important element is actually a fourth element, which is without sacrificing profit, because sometimes you can achieve those first 3 with heroic efforts, like working 12-hour days, which, by the way, y'all, is not healthy. Don't do that. But it eats into your profit margin. It's kind of invisible money, but it's still money that you're losing because you're spending more hours on this project than you had estimated to do. So on time, within budget, with features that meet the client's business requirements without sacrificing profit. That lets you do the happy dance. That's what WordPress project success is. But what is a project? The experts also define a project as a temporary endeavor that has a beginning and an end. It's a sequence of tasks that's carried out to attain a certain outcome. Sorry, I got money on the brain. So what does that mean? That means that just about everything is a project, y'all. Everything you do, and you do these things every day and you don't even realize it, that you're doing projects every day. And these are things like your weekly grocery shopping, tiling your kitchen floor, losing 60 pounds is a project. Building a website, of course, is a project. Things that are not projects are things like caring for your lawn, because that's like an ongoing thing. Maybe mowing your lawn on a certain day might be a project, but caring for your lawn in general is not. Keeping a tidy home, there's no end to that. You've got to continuously do it. Improving your business, that should be a continuous process as well. Providing care plans. That's also something that never really ends. You've got to continue to do that. There are some aspects of project management, though, that can be applied to things that aren't technically a project, right? Because getting things done on time and within budget is still important. Now, let's get to our final definition, which is what the hell is a best practice? I'm sorry, what the heck is a best practice? A best practice is a commercial or professional procedure that is accepted or prescribed as being correct or most effective. So where did these best practices come from that I'm getting ready to share with you? Well, back in the 90s, I worked for a company called Keen. They're based in Boston. And John Keen, the CEO of that company, wrote a book called Productivity Management. Is their project management approach to software development. And that's the industry that we worked in. I was a consultant. And he developed these 6 productivity principles for software development. But they apply it to everything, y'all. They don't apply just to software development. They're kind of implemented a little differently, but they're exactly the same. Okay, so, and here are those 6 practices, 6 best practices. Define the job in detail, get the right resources involved, estimate the time and costs, break the job down, establish a change procedure, and agree on acceptance criteria. Okay, so let's break this down into those things that you do every day, like grocery shopping. Okay, with grocery shopping, you agree on acceptance criteria because you know that you need to get everything that's needed for your meals that week, or you know that you need to get everything that you need for a particular recipe or some baking that you're going to do. When you define the job in detail, that's your grocery list. To estimate the time and cost, before you go to the grocery store, you pretty much know you either have the cash in your pocket, the cash in your checking account, or enough available credit on your credit card. So you have estimated that project. It's a little simplistic, but you get the point. Breaking the job down, if you organize your shopping trip by grocery aisle, you've broken that job down into particular steps. Getting the right resources involved. You pick the right store, or maybe you shop different stores based on what's on sale. So you're getting the right resources involved. If you're using the sales flyer, you're getting resources involved. And then establishing a change procedure. I know lately I go to the store and there's a whole lot that's usually on the shelves that isn't on the shelves, right? And so what are you going to do if your brand is not available? You're going to wait, go to a different store, or you're going to buy a different brand. So all of these things apply to day to day. Now, this next one's a little personal to me. Losing 60 pounds is the same thing. Your acceptance criteria is I want to reach my goal weight by a certain date. I'm going to define that job in detail because I'm going to determine which weight loss plan I'm going to go on. I'm going to throw away all that nasty food I shouldn't be eating, and I'm going to buy all the healthy food that I should be eating. That's defining the job in detail, breaking that down into the steps. Estimating the time and cost. How much is this new plan going to cost me? And how much is it going to cost to eat better food versus eating out and drinking wine, right? And then breaking the job down. What are the small changes that I need to make on a day-to-day basis that then rolls up into the larger thing about losing weight? And for me, when the losing weight thing was, this was hydrating, because I was never drinking enough water, always drinking too much caffeine and coffee and things like that. So that's one way of breaking the job down: drinking more water, getting more exercise, eating the right food. That's breaking the job down. Getting the right resources involved. I actually do have a weight loss coach, believe it or not. And I didn't think I needed that accountability, but I really did. So that's just one way of getting the right resources involved. Establishing a change procedure. What if I had a specific, I didn't, but what if I had a specific date in mind, like I was wanting to go to a high school reunion, or I had this big event and I wanted to lose a certain amount of weight. Well, what am I going to do if it takes longer than I planned? Am I just going to buy larger clothes for the special event? What am I going to do? So you're going to have a change procedure. Now, that's all really simplistic and very nice and tidy, but website development's a little different. And we have to kind of expand these 6 best practices for website development. And so here's how I've taken those original core best practices. And those best practices, by the way, I have been implementing over the last 20 to 30 years since John Keen taught them to me before he passed away. He was brilliant because, this is kind of an aside, but Everybody talks about agile development these days, right? As a methodology for project management, agile. And the sprint. Well, John Keane back in the 80s actually developed the 80-hour rule, which is the same thing as a sprint, but it's just got a different name attached to it. Okay, so and our stuff was mostly waterfall, which is one phase. What you complete in one phase then is used to develop the next thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later in this same presentation. So the 6 best practices when applied to website development are: define the job in detail with a content first approach, get the right resources involved, that doesn't change, estimate time and costs often, break the job down, establish and stick to a change procedure. Most agencies, most solo providers have a change procedure. The problem is they don't usually stick to their own procedure. Establish interim and final acceptance criteria. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that means in a minute. So let's get on to the first best practice, which is define the job in detail with a content first approach. Now, I've numbered these for reference purposes, but the best practices are, I'm sorry, I have to move David out of my way because I can't see my slide notes. Hold on a second. Zoom is in the way. Okay.
Wow.
Sorry. I've moved you now. I can read my notes. And my dog is barking.
I had a nickel for every time I've been moved, but go ahead.
It's true, isn't it? And now my dog wants to bark at someone who has the audacity to walk down our street. Okay. So I've numbered these for reference purposes, but they're really implemented in no real order, and they really overlap. It's not a linear thing, right? These are best practices that should run through your whole project management methodology or the way that you develop and deliver projects. So define the job in detail with a content first approach. The first thing you need to remember and always do is that the detailed discovery comes before a precise estimate. Because there is no way after an hour and a half pre-proposal meeting with the client that you're going to capture every business requirement for the website. And by that, I mean business problems the website is intended to solve. I teach my students and I preach all the time about stop asking the client in the very first meeting, which websites do you like? Tell me about the websites you don't like. Because honestly, it really doesn't matter at proposal time. It doesn't matter. What matters is, in what way will this website be used to enhance the business? What are the business requirements? And to quote Jason Resnick, if anyone knows who he is, the website is not art. It is a marketing tool, it is a business tool, and it should be treated as such. And that's why you should be focusing on the business requirements. So if you're giving a precise and final estimate in your proposal, you are using the crystal ball approach to estimating, but I'm going to show you a better way. And that is to position phase 1 as the discovery phase. Because you cannot estimate what you do not yet know. You need to position phase 1 as the discovery or have it as a separate project altogether. But I think that's a much harder sell. So I include it as part of the discovery, the discovery as part of the project. And so I've got a little graphic that I'm going to show you. That's my method for, and the ones my students use for defining the job in detail and getting paid for the discovery. That's another thing people struggle with, is getting paid for discovery. So we start out with a pre-proposal questionnaire, which we might do in person. We might just have them fill it out, or we might walk the client through that. The next thing we do is we estimate the content and the other activities. We provide that initial estimate in the proposal stated as a range. It might be as little as this, it might be as much as this. And if the client does not approve that, then the project ends. They never really became a project, right? But if they do approve that, then we get a deposit for all of phase 1, so that phase 1 is going to be covered no matter what. And sometimes, because we focus so much on planning before we ever start developing, sometimes that's way more than 50%. We're kind of stuck in this mindset of 50% at the beginning, 50% at the end, or these arbitrary percentages at different milestones. And really, you basically just need to get paid before you do the work, honestly. So we get a deposit that covers all of phase one. Then we, let's see, there we go. I'm sorry, I was looking at the future slide instead of the one that's actually on the screen. So we get that deposit and we go to phase one. Now, when we get to phase one, because I call the first phase zero, because if it doesn't become, if it doesn't get approved, then I don't call it a project. So phase one starts after the proposal is approved. So phase one is project definition. That's where we perform that deep dive discovery. During that process, we're going to add any new requirements we discover along the way. And then we're going to adjust our work breakdown structure or our project plan and add those activities to reflect those change requirements. And at the end of, and we break this down into little bitty pieces, which I'll talk about in a minute, but we're going to come out with a detailed statement of work or the website spec or whatever name you want to give to it. But in this second part of your proposal that sometimes takes months to create, we're going to have a much more precise estimate. Now, notice I did not use the word accurate estimate because there is no such thing. Estimate by nature is fluid and is expected to change over time as you discover things. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it comes down. If the client says, hey, we've decided we're not going to do that, then the estimate will come down. Now, does that new estimate exceed that range that I gave in the proposal? If the answer to that is no, we just move on to phase two because we're already under contract and we're just moving on. But if it does exceed that, I give the client the option to cancel because they've already paid for that website spec and they can now take it. Well, if they decide not to cancel, then we move on to phase two. But if they do decide to cancel, I give them that detailed statement of work. I've been paid for it. They can go on and take that and try to find somebody cheaper if that's what they want to do. But they've got that documentation of what they need for their website. It's a win-win for everybody. But like I said, they hardly ever cancel because they've been shoulder to shoulder with you as you've gone through this project definition. And they know these new requirements that came up that weren't considered in the proposal. So they're usually okay with it. Now, why do we include with a content first approach as part of this best practice? Well, most WordPress gurus agree that content should actually drive the design. And most of them will tell you that. But you need to do more than just consider the content first. You need to collect it all first too. Because it speeds development, it reduces scope creep, and it prevents that content collection bottleneck. So that's why we and Nathan Ingram and many other people who've been doing this for a really long time do not start development until we get all of the content. But let me show you what I mean. All right, this is the way we've always done it, right? You get 50% at the beginning, or this is the way we were taught, or some people were taught, or I still hear people talking about this. I get 50% up front and 50 at the end. Well, what happens is when you get around to the content part, if your client is doing the content, then the project stalls. And what most people will do is they'll say, you know what, we'll just go ahead and finish out the website. And then when the client gets the content, we'll just pop it into the right places. And then weeks go by and months go by. And in some cases, I swear y'all, people claim that years go by before the client comes back with the content. And of course, then they want their website built in 2 weeks because here's my content. Let's get it done. And what happens in a lot of cases, and sometimes the client will continually will actually ghost out and you'll never see them again. So you've done all that work on the second half of the website and you're not getting paid for it. So that's why we say use a content first approach. And to do that, you really need to structure your project plan for content first. Now, these are the phases that I use and that my students use for developing a website. And while we're doing the proposal, we estimate what the needed content is. During that project definition phase is where we identify who's going to do the content and when they're going to deliver it. And then during phase 2, which is design and preparation, they're going to go off and collect all that content while you're doing things like setting up the environment. You're not developing, you're just setting things up and getting all your ducks in a row ready for that content. And we don't start any of the development before we get that content and move into development and testing. Because quite frankly, y'all, I mean, the truth is, if you have everything you need on a shelf, everything's defined, all your plugins, you've figured out how they need to be configured, everything is decided. Once you've got the content, how long is it actually going to take you to build that website? Not very long. Even if it's a big one, it's probably, if you've got the content, it's not going to take that long. So when you do it this way, you spend a lot of time on planning, and you spend very little time on those last 2 phases. Your payment structure and what happens when the client delays content should also be clearly spelled out in your contract. And if you use the payment structure that I use, if the client ghosts you before the final payment, it's only a small amount that you end up losing. Because what I do is I get that first deposit at the proposal. I get what will cover all of phase 1. At the end of phase 1, before phase 2 starts, we get 50% of whatever's remaining. And then at the end of the next phase, we get 50% of whatever's remaining. And then so by the time you get to the very end, there's very little left in that budget that you haven't already been paid. Okay, so now let's look at the next best practice. That is, hold on, I'm looking at the wrong slide. Get the right resources involved. Now, resources include people, and sometimes you can't get the right person that you want. So you have to take the people that you have and involve them rightly. So it's either get the right resources involved or involve the resources rightly. That's kind of bad grammar, but you get my point. Now, so these are all the different roles that are actually filled on most web development projects. And chances are, especially if you're a solopreneur or a single person agency, you're doing all of these things. And so another thing I do to kind of set the stage for my client to understand that this is a lot more complicated than they probably think it is I will list these in my proposal and put my name by each one of them. Now, there's some of them that they need to do, like the end user, right? But to do that, I list those and it really sets the stage with the client that this is a complicated process. And just because you're seeing ads on TV that tell you can build a website in an hour, it's really not that simple, especially if there's e-commerce or memberships or anything like that involved. The other kind of resource, of course, is your, moving that to the other screen. Oh, are you seeing that if I move it over there? I've got too many people on my screen. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get this out of the way. All right. Plugins. You need to have a standard stack of plugins if you don't already have one. Most people do, but for your standard business processes, the business plugins like security and caching and that sort of thing, you need to have those already decided upon. When you need a specialized plugin, you need to make a list of the requirements that you of what you needed to do before you start shopping. And please, before you start asking in a Facebook group, what's the best blank for blank, right? If you haven't written down your requirements, if you don't even know what you're looking for, we would never start building a website without knowing what the requirements are. Why do we go shopping for plugins and tools before we have all the requirements ironed out? We tend to go in there and just because some mentor or some big WordPress guru or influencer or whatever kind of tag you want to give them says that this is the tool that they use, then we think that's the tool we need to be using too. And it's really not the case. You need to develop your requirements. And then, of course, you've got tools, which are part of your getting the right resources involved. The main thing to remember here, this is a list. I'm not going to read it to you, but this is a list of common tools that you use on projects. The main thing to remember is that a tool is never going to do the job for you. It should be support. I get asked all the time, what's the best project management tool? What's the best project management tool? And it just 100% depends on your requirements. And it's not going to manage the project for you. It's there to support your ability to manage the project. Okay. Web hosting. Cheap shared hosting is okay for some websites, y'all. It just is. It's okay for small, low traffic sites that aren't dependent on SEO. Like, say a company gets all of their business by referral, but needs a web presence anyway. They need their clients to be able to log into something, to see some content or something. They do not necessarily have to have the Mac Daddy hosting. However, for the most part, and you all probably already know this, using a reputable host, use a reputable host if you're doing complicated sites like e-commerce or memberships, where there'll be, or any place where there'll be a lot of traffic. Just pay for the best thing you can afford. That's the best thing you can do when it comes to these kinds of resources. That's why I advise for getting the right resource involved when it comes to hosting. Okay, best practice number 3, break the job down. Pardon me. It's best to break the project down into activities and tasks. Well, you start with phases, activities and tasks, so that you know you're estimating for all of the stuff that really needs to get done. Now, if you're not doing this now, you will probably be very surprised how many things you're actually doing that you're not charging for, and you should be charging for them. And it also helps you identify repeatable processes that you can develop that's going to save you time on project after project after project, because you're doing things the same way. One moment. I lost my cursor. Okay. You need to break deliverables into smaller parts. So here's a graphic that shows the way I break down the project definition phase. These are the deliverables that we create. Now, yours might end up being different. And on smaller projects, I sometimes combine some of these together so there aren't so many review cycles. But the idea is to break things down into chunks that make it easy for the client to approve or accept. So this is called the Waterfall Approach, where each deliverable is built on what was approved in the previous deliverable. So after something is approved, then let's say we get to, so we start with a sitemap, then we develop the content specification from that sitemap. Then we use those two things to, and of course, many conversations with the client to document what the functional requirements are. What are the functions that this website should do? And then, and only then, do we talk about design, because all of those things have an impact on the way you're going to design the project or the website. And then all of those things together, along with some other stuff like some technical requirements, the plugins that you're going to be using and that sort of stuff, becomes your full website spec. And that's why it looks like a waterfall, and one thing builds on the other. But after, let's say that the sitemap is approved, you get down to the functional requirement step, and the client goes, oh no, I forgot to tell you, we're going to need 4 bio pages for each of the senior executives with their picture and a blurb about who they are and all that. Okay, well, we already approved the sitemap, so that's a change. That would go through your change control process because it's already been approved. Let's see, was there something else I wanted to say about that? No, I think that was it. So it's important to just remember this is called the waterfall approach, because you'll hear people talk about agile and waterfall, and this is the concept of waterfall. A lot of times it'll be talking more about phases, but it's still the same thing. You're breaking it down, and the next thing builds on the previous thing. Okay, best practice number 4, estimate the time and cost often. Now, why do I say often? Because if you go back and re-estimate often, you're going to always know where you are on that schedule, on that project. Are you on schedule? Are you behind schedule? How much money, both the real money and the invisible money we talked about, have you actually spent? So here are some tips for employing this best practice. Abandon the crystal ball approach to estimating. As I mentioned earlier, if you're giving a precise and final estimate in your proposal, you're using the crystal ball approach to estimating. And honestly, this never, ever works. You need to develop a repeatable, mathematical, defendable estimating process that you can improve over time. And by defendable, I mean that if a client should ask, and they're never going to ask this, but should a client ask how you estimate projects, you should not be embarrassed to explain it. But if you're adding a pad in there, if you're arbitrarily adding some money to each phase, I actually heard a very well-respected WordPress guru recently posted an article that kind of suggested that's exactly what you should do. And I'm saying that's exactly what you shouldn't do. Because if you're padding your estimate to cover the unknowns, then you're never going to be able to pinpoint exactly where things went awry, where things went wrong, so that you can fix it on the next project. I actually have a whole talk called Why the Pad is Bad. Yeah, because I get up on my soapbox when I'm talking about that sort of stuff.
Am I allowed to submit jokes to that in writing to you in advance? Or
sure.
Okay. Thank you.
I always love a joke.
Right. Sorry.
Why the pad is bad.
Now I'm muting.
Okay.
I'm muting myself again now.
Okay. So you saw in the two-step proposal process that there are at least two estimates, right? And we estimate at the activity level when we do the proposal, and then we drill down during the deep dive discovery, and we estimate at the task level. So after the pre-proposal meeting with the client, I use my standard project plan template, and I take a best guess at the activities that are going to be included in that project. And then I estimate for those activities to come up with my proposal estimate. And then we drill down to the task level during the deep dive, because that's where those new things come up and new tasks might need to be added. And then we estimate for each task, which then rolls up to the activity, which rolls up to the phase, which rolls up to the entire project estimate. And it's a mistake if you don't also consider the magnitude of the content and the related activities and tasks when drafting your estimate. Even if you're not the one completing those activities, you need to estimate them for the client or the third party. And then the other, what we use when I teach my students is to develop a rough order of magnitude based on the sitemap and the number of pages that you've got. You can kind of guesstimate, let's use that word, how many paragraphs, how many images, how many videos, how many tables that you are likely going to need on this website. And a lot of times when you show the client that rough order of magnitude and then show them how, because you break it down to man hours, and then show them how much time it's going to take, that's all it really takes to convince them not to do their own content and to let you hire a third party or let you do it yourself. If you offer that sort of service, because generally, if you try to convince them that they're not good writers, you'll get pushback. But if you show them, look, you should be spending time on your business. You shouldn't be spending, 6 weeks writing content for this website. And so that's why we use that rough order of magnitude. The other times that you need to estimate is at each status reporting period. Let's see, I'm sorry, I got to move this Zoom thing out of the way again. Because that's generally when you can look at your what you've completed so far, what's still left to be completed, and are we where we want to be. You want to re-estimate after each deliverable sign off. Of course, every single change request needs to be estimated. And then when resources unexpectedly change, like some plugin that you've been using forever, all of a sudden is removed from the repository. It's kind of a big deal. And you might have to change your approach and find a different plugin, or maybe your lead developer goes on maternity leave earlier than you expected. So when resources change unexpectedly, you would also do the change request to change the schedule. But you would also re-estimate your project. Okay. Probably one of the biggest things to remember about estimating often is that you always want to review your last estimate before doing the next one, because you can't get better at estimating if you don't measure it and compare it over time. So how far off were you the last time? Why were you off with your estimate the last time? And that way you don't make that mistake the next time. Okay, best practice number 5. Establish and stick to a change procedure. Basically, not actively managing inevitable change inevitably results lost revenue. Yes, I have a quote from myself in this slide deck. Is that tacky? I don't know, but I did it anyway. Because it's the truth. It's just like flushing money down the proverbial toilet. First off, you need to position project change as inevitable with your client. A plan is just a plan, y'all. That's what the whole word means. It's a plan, and any number of things can change that plan. It's sort of like a GPS, right? You're tooling along, the GPS is telling you where to go, and then you hit an unexpected detour where the road is blocked off. Well, then, so you turn right, and then the GPS recalculates. It's exactly the same thing with projects. So, and the other thing is, stop treating change like a penalty. Like the client, oh my God, the client's got so many changes. But sometimes they just can't think of these things until they get into the project, or someone comes up with a really good idea later on. You don't want to treat those things like a penalty. You treat it like an opportunity, because you're going to get paid. If you're making change to the project and you invoke your change control process, you're going to get paid for that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this change control process and how to make sure you get paid for all the changes. But it's not the client's fault, so quit penalizing them for it. Okay, a good change control process always uses a change budget. Now, I don't know how many of you guys know Nathan Ingram, but he's been developing websites as long as I've been in IT. He's been developing websites, and he heard my talk on the change budget, and he added this to his process. I heard his talk on proposals and master services agreements, and I changed my process. So it's never too late to learn things and improve your processes based on what you're learning from other folks. Just making that point. But so what is a change budget? I'm going to explain that in just a minute. First, let's look at the advantages of a change budget. It's kind of self-explanatory, but we'll get to the detail in just a second. As I mentioned earlier, when you pad an estimate with an arbitrary number of dollars and use it for just any old thing, you can't measure it and you can't improve what you're doing. With a good change control procedure that you invoke without exception that also uses a change budget, you can measure where change is occurring and put things in place to prevent that the next time. There's some different questions you need to ask early on in the process, and that will prevent the change. But here's how the change budget works. You estimate the project without a pad. Then you take 20 to 30% of that total and add it to the total project estimate as a separate budget item. The difference is all those other budget items, they're going to pay you for. But this one, if there are no approved changes through the course of the project, and that never happens, but if there are no approved changes, the money isn't used. The client is the one who has final approval over all those changes, over all change requests. So they get to decide whether they spend that money, extra money or not. So because you've planned for and budgeted for change, you don't need to pad the estimate. And it's funny how this also, the change budget tends to reduce frivolous changes, because something about having to take that money, that invisible money in that invisible bucket, and put it into the project budget, asking the client and telling them they have to do that. And you've, of course, laid out all of this at the beginning of the project, so they understand this process. It's not something you spring on them when there is a change request, but that is a lot harder for them to do. So they're going to be a lot less likely to say, can you just change that blue to a different shade across the whole website? I just really don't like that color blue. Yeah, sure. We'll do that for another $500. Now that's an extreme example. Of course, you probably wouldn't charge 500, but you would charge them some money to do that because they'd already approved that blue color. But the best thing, the most magic thing about the change budget is that when you use a change budget, it means that you can magically always come in under budget and under the total project budget. I'm still moving things around on my screen, y'all, so I can see everything I need to see. So that's why I'm pausing from time to time. You just have to provide a really good estimate, do a good job on the discovery, and then make sure that the change budget percentage is enough to cover the potential change. The percentage that you choose to use is largely dependent on your initial impressions of the client and how likely they are to be unorganized and request change often. You know, you usually get in your gut, you usually get a feeling in your gut for how difficult this client's going to be in those first couple of meetings. So that's how you decide how much to put in that change budget. And if there are, and I just did one recently, it was a $5,000 change. A $5,000 change, and the client did not blink. And the reason they didn't blink is because I educated them on this process at the very beginning. They knew what they were asking for, and they knew it was going to cost them more money. So if there's so many changes that you run out of money in the change budget, just my client had friends. I just saw that come up in the, this honestly is the best client I've ever had. They're so easy. It's a big retail store too. But anyway, if there's so many changes that you run out of money in the change budget, you do a change request to increase the change budget. So here's a little graphic of how this works. All right. I've lost my little thing there. Before I go to the next slide. Okay. So we start with the change request, and that change request can be initiated by anybody on the project. Maybe it's you, maybe it's the client, maybe it's a team member. And then it comes to the project manager, which is typically you. That's the role of the project manager. You might also be the developer and the SEO guy and everything else. But that comes to the project manager to assess the impact to the project. And then that change request goes to the client for approval. If the client approves it, then that money comes out of the change budget. It gets added to the project budget and you get paid. Now, sometimes I bill for that immediately as soon as the change is approved. Other times I will wait. And if it's a client I know well and I'm not worried about getting paid, I'll add it to the last payment of the project. And it also depends on how big the change is. I got paid for that $5,000 change right away. If they don't approve it, then you create your phase 2 parking lot. Or list of potential things for phase 2. And then if the client wants to institute that phase 2 and they hire you to do it, guess what? You get paid. So this is how you always get paid for all the changes. And now we're down to the last best practice. I hope I haven't been talking too long. And that is establish interim and final acceptance criteria. Now, why am I using the word acceptance instead of approval? Well, the reason is the client might not approve of something that they're seeing in your final design, but if it meets the agreed upon acceptance criteria that you decided upon before you ever started building anything, then it must be accepted. The other thing about acceptance, establishing acceptance up front, is that you need to use incremental acceptance. And this is similar to a graphic I showed you earlier. But you're going to get that sitemap approved, and then you're going to get that content spec approved or accepted. They kind of use them interchangeably, but when you're talking to the client, it's always better to use the word acceptance. You're going to get your functional requirements approved. You're going to get your design approved. So you've gotten all the little pieces approved along the way. So when you get to the full website spec to get that approved and signed off on, so you can just go willy-nilly now and build that website, it happens in a fraction of the time, which is going to save you money, which means more money in your hands. Now, I mentioned before that these 6 best practices are not linear, and they're all interrelated. But if I had to choose the single most important or the single most critical best practice, it would be definitely define the job in detail with a content first approach. Because if you do that right, a lot of these other things kind of take care of themselves. But much of what is involved in defining the job in detail is the other principles or the other best practices are really part of that. So if I had to identify the most important one, this would be it. Now, to implement this particular best practice, at a minimum, what you're going to need is a requirements definition process, a really good change procedure, and an acceptance management plan. And I'm going to tell you in a moment how to learn more about these things and how to get some free samples of that. But before we do that, let's do a quick review of these 6 best practices that we just covered. Define the job in detail with a content first approach. Get the right resources involved. Break the job down. Estimate time and cost often. Establish and stick to a change procedure. Establish interim and final acceptance criteria. Now, if you want to learn more how to do this and get your hands on some free samples of the processes that you need to put in place, you can do that by joining the WP Project Managers Academy. We have a free free track and a premium track. In the free track, you get a ton of these templates and downloads and things that you can use to develop your own project management methodology. The premium one just gives you a bunch more of that done for you, and a lot more lessons from other industry professionals besides just me. Another thing you can do is you can watch out for my new book that I'm getting ready to release, hopefully within the next 30 to 60 days. If I'm a good project manager, that will actually happen. This is not exactly what the cover is going to look like, but I think we have finally settled on a title that Project Management Sucks, but it doesn't have to. And the best way to watch out for this book, to keep an eye on what's going on, is to join our Facebook group. And you can just go into Facebook and search on WordPress Project Management, or you can go to facebook.com/groups/WordPress PM. And if you want to download today's slides, you can go to wproadmaps.com/speaking, and they are at the top of the long list of slide decks from all the talks I've ever given. So that's how you can do that. And if you want to get in touch with me, I am at WP Roadmaps on Twitter and Instagram, and you can always email me at beth@wproadmaps.com. I watch that. Yeah, I answer everything in that email account all the time. So that's how you can get in touch with me. So that's the end of my talk, y'all. I hope that you got some sense of how these are things that you're really kind of already doing anyway, and how to apply those to your WordPress projects. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, put it in the chat that you thought it was good. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, people are already responding. I mean, I think somebody's smoking a cigarette right now. That was how good it was. Thank you, Beth, very much for that. We don't have much time for questions, but I know we had one. Guy, can you, at least one,
Yep.
and can you read that one, and I'll make sure
Sure.
that we're not missing anything. And we'll
Sure.
try to keep the response to like 60 seconds or less, because we're going to be moving along here in a second.
I know. I'm sorry. I tried to talk fast, but not fast enough.
No, it's like my Subway. It's like my Subway sandwiches. Oh no, that's a bad example. I don't eat those anymore. It's like an Oreo, double stuffed. That I'm giving up. Go ahead, Guy.
All right, Beth. Stephen asked when you're talking about change budgets, he said it was great info, but how will this apply to smaller projects when a competitor will give a quote and my agency wants to get paid for discovery and creating a statement of work?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Stephen is wondering how the change budget technique will apply to smaller projects when a competitor will give a quote and his agency wants to get paid for discovery and the statement of work. So I guess he's trying he's wondering if he's going to lose a quote or a bid, because if he adds a change budget versus
Well, here's the thing. Most of the time when we worry about that, we're projecting what we think the client's going to push back on. But if you walk in there as a professional and you're showing them, look, we already know that that change is going to happen. and so here's how we're going to manage that instead of just letting it go willy-nilly. And then what another thing I give my students is 8 questions to get that client to ask the next guy. And the client needs to ask the next guy, how are you going to handle change? How is that going to happen? And when they start asking that they're your competition, those questions that you can answer that they can't answer, you don't have anything to worry about. Did that answer the question?
I think so, unless Stephen has any more thoughts on that.
There was one more question, and it was from Jim, and I'm trying to find it right now.
Stephen followed up. He said, not the change budget, but at the start of the process. So maybe I missed.
Well, it's the same thing. Honestly, if you go, we think our clients are going to push back on process and they're going to be all overwhelmed by all this stuff. They appreciate it, y'all. Not just big clients like this big retail client. I've got some really small clients. But I still use these same principles. Now, sometimes you have to scale things down a bit and tailor it for the type of client that you're, like sometimes like the ones that aren't very technical, sometimes you have to modify things for them. But the basics of this, it works. It's been working for 40 years. So it does work. It's just the way you present it. But you come off looking like more of a professional.
All right. Real quickly, I have another question here from Brian. How do you approach a client who wants a quick fix, but you know it can lead on to a bigger project? Do you do exploration fees?
A quick fix.
So if you know it's a quick, like they're asking for a quick fix, but you know better that it's going to turn into a snowball effect probably. And so
Right.
do you have exploration fees for presenting what that could happen?
Look, I charge the client if I'm working. If I'm working for the client, they're going to get charged. Whether you call it an exploration fee or however you set things up, you got to get paid for that discovery. The minute that you say, you know what, that's only going to take me 15 minutes. I'm just going to throw it in. I'm not going to worry about it. The change request is going to take too long. The first time you do that, then you're going to be expected to do it again and again and again and again. It's human nature for them to behave that way too. They're not being ugly. It's human nature. If you give me a little bit, I'm going to want a little bit more.
Speaking of a little bit more, I don't think we can afford a little bit more because I'm so fat of knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. If there's any other additional questions, just go ahead and leave them in the chat and Beth can respond there, or maybe we'll have time later to do another roundup. But I wanted to make sure that we at 7:30, that we start our second talk. Forgive me, I'm gonna see if I can pin Nick here, which sounded better in my head. All right, hey, say hi, Nick.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, well, let's just move straight into this one. Nick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let's start talking about some blocks. And I just want to make it clear that this is this talk is both for developers and also for everybody in general who are interested in the magic of blocks. Not the Lego kind, the other kind. All right, I'm sorry. Take it away, sir.
All right, let me see if this can work here. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Give me a second because Zoom might require me to... I don't know what immersive is. Nope, that's not what I want. Are you sharing anything?
I am.
There it
Now
is.
I can see my screen. You good?
I think so.
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, welcome everybody to Embracing the Power of Blocks. So it's awesome that Beth gave her talk because our talks could not be more different. She has such a deep knowledge of project management, running an agency, that entire side of WordPress. This talk is not that, but hopefully it provides some good contrast. So a little bit about me. So I'm calling myself a WordPress developer, but I've actually been doing hospitality marketing for the last 9 years. So I've been working in hospitality my entire life. I have no formal training in web development. or really any other coding environment for that matter. But as part of working in marketing for the resort I worked with, they needed to build a blog for the culinary staff, and we discovered WordPress in 2012. And after discovering WordPress, I kind of just fell in love with it. You know, you crack open a theme, kind of play around with things. And over time, over the next 2 years of just playing around with WordPress as a hobby, I released my first WordPress plugin in 2014. And then in 2020, in April, we all know what happened, the pandemic hit. And the resort actually I worked for actually closed for a short period of time. I stayed on, but we were basically shut. And so that gave me time to kind of go back and continue exploring WordPress. And I spent a lot of time looking at the new block editor, or Gutenberg, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. And at that time, after building lots of plugins in PHP and all these coding languages, I realized, I really need to learn JavaScript and React to start working with the block editor in Gutenberg. So the pandemic gave me the time to do that. And so during the summer, I quote unquote learned JavaScript and React. And we'll talk more about this if you're not familiar with those two coding languages. We'll talk more about this as the talk continues. But it gave me time to learn these new coding languages, enough to start understanding how the new block editor and Gutenberg worked. And then I was able to release my first kind of block-based plugin as kind of a side experiment, just to kind of experiment with the stuff that I had learned. And then in June 2021, I retired from the hospitality business. And I decided that now is the time to start doing WordPress development full time. So why do I tell you all this? I tell you all this to say that everything that I'm about to talk about, I have learned myself. And there could be some things that are incorrect, but also kind of showcase how I went through this process. You know, I'm not working for a big company that's building massive sites for clients. This was kind of my journey through WordPress in this new modern environment, which, you know, everybody was new at one point. And so way back in 2012, when I was first learning WordPress in PHP, so much has changed now. And I think that this will be kind of a good overview of those changes. So let's start by the very simple question of what is a block? Well, from the WordPress.org support page, blocks are components for adding content to the new WordPress block editor. But let's focus on components for adding content, because I think that that's like the simplest way to think about it. It's just a tool for adding content. So as we start talking about blocks, it behooves us to start talking about the history of Gutenberg. So, and I always like to start in 2015. So I'm not sure how many on this call watched The State of the Word Address by Matt back in 2015. But at the very end of it, he said something very important, which was learn JavaScript deeply. And this was kind of at the time when Calypso had just come out. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that, which was built on Node and React was kind of new at that time. And it was kind of ominous, right? And I didn't start learning JavaScript until 2020. So clearly I didn't really learn from his premonition there. But sure enough, in 2017, they started development on the Gutenberg plugin. We're not going to talk about why it has a 2-star rating, but suffice it to say, there is some controversy around the project. It's a big change. Any big change has controversy. So the before times. So a lot of us in this room are probably still using a lot of this. We have the classic WordPress editor. We have navigation menus on their own screen, and we have widgets. You know, all this stuff is core quintessential WordPress. But in 2 years or 3 years or however long, or even today, like personally, I don't use any of this. And it's just a testament to how far WordPress has come and how quickly things are changing. So another quote here, this one by Matt. So what is the idea of a block? The idea of a block was to create a new common language across WordPress. So, and to replace a number of old content types like shortcodes and widgets. So if we go back here and we look at this page, we have the post editor or the classic editor. We have widgets, which are kind of like their own content type. Then we have navigation menus and navigation links and stuff. These are kind of all three separate entities. And so blocks were kind of a way to kind of encapsulate everything into one common language. So with that vision in mind, in 2018, WordPress 5.0 is released. And with that release came the block editor. So those who have used the block editor, this is what it looks like. And you remember in that quote by Matt, he was talking about taking widgets and other things like it and putting into this common language of blocks. And here you can see latest posts, which was a widget, is still a widget, is now brought into the block editor as a block itself. So we're starting to see all these different content types within WordPress being consolidated into one place. So then fast forward a lot during 2018 and July 2021, tons of stuff happened. Lots of development on Gutenberg, lots of setbacks. If you go back and look at the articles and video clips of the projections on how fast we were going to move with the block editor, every benchmark or every timetable has been blown out of the water. But in July 2021, WordPress 5.8 was released, which provided preliminary support for theme.json, block-based widgets, and it sets the stage for full site editing. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but 5.8 was a very big release, and 5.9, which will hopefully be coming or potentially be coming at the end of this year or beginning of 2022, will be a huge release because it will incorporate full site editing. Okay, so what is full site editing? I doubt many people are actually using full site editing at this time. It is really like the bleeding edge of WordPress. In order to use full site editing functionality, you need to have the Gutenberg plugin installed. So the past couple screenshots, we were looking at kind of this homepage for an outdoor adventure company. Full site editing takes all the functionality of WordPress, all the standard functionality of WordPress, like headers and templates and the page itself, and it brings it into one editing interface. So you can see on this is what's called the site editor. We have our navigation, we have templates, and the key piece here is that everything is a block. Even the template parts, even parts of the template, they're all blocks. So we've transitioned from old WordPress, where you had these different content types, to now in the future where everything is a block. And the question is, okay, cool, but why does that matter? Why is that a good thing to pursue? And because it's a hard road. I mean, WordPress has been, what is it, 42% of the internet? So many people have built so many powerful things on top of WordPress. You start to introduce this new concept of blocks and the site editor, the block editor, it tends to severely disrupt businesses like what Beth was talking about, agencies running businesses with clients and stuff who've been doing the same thing year after year with the quote unquote classic editor and widgets and all that stuff. People, I myself have built plugins specifically for widgets, plugins specifically for navigation. And now we're talking about this dynamic when everything is one content type. So it breeds a lot of controversy and it is challenging for the community to adapt to it. So this quote I like, but also it's a little bit funny to think about since this was in 2017. So again, context of 2017, right when Gutenberg development had started. Today, every plugin that extends WordPress does it in a different way. Gutenberg's blocks provide a single, easy to learn entry point that is for an incredible variety of extensions. So I think the easy to learn is kind of, you look back and cringe on it a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the idea is sound. You have a singular content type. So instead of going out and building a plugin that only works with widgets, or going out and building a plugin that's only for navigation, if you can go out and build a plugin or build a tool that is for blocks, then you're able to target any content type you like. And we'll get to that, why I think that's so incredible in the future. But easy to learn is contentious. I want to touch on it here. This could be a talk in and of itself. But what are the challenges of modern WordPress development. So it's going back to that React and JavaScript. A general understanding of React and JavaScript really is essential. Now, there are tools coming out that kind of sidestep that and allow you to build blocks only using PHP. Great. I mean, it's a great way to speed up development, get blocks out to clients, that sort of thing. But in order to really dive deep into WordPress development, really understand everything that's going on and build future solutions within WordPress, a solid understanding of React and JavaScript will be necessary. And I think this is a kind of funny anecdote. So I built a plugin back in 2015, which was pretty substantial in terms of like the file size. And it used 85% PHP and only 7.4% JavaScript. And then it had a little bit of CSS as well. Fast forward to 2021, my project I'm currently working on is 59% JavaScript, 22% PHP. And then you have SCSS, which might as well be bundled into the JavaScript camp because it is a type of CSS, or it's debatable, but it requires a build process, which so you can't just like crack open a SCSS file, make some changes, and then your changes are live. So it adds to the complexity of building projects within WordPress. So because Gutenberg is being continually developed, so I talked about those incremental releases where we had the block editor in 2018, and then 5.8 introduced all this new full site editing stuff, and we'll be getting more in the future. Gutenberg, the plugin itself, is still live and is still churning, and all the latest features of this project for blocks and block editor and full site editing are being developed with Gutenberg. That's always changing, and it can be very hard to keep up with. Now, a lot of fantastic people in the community have come out with things like the Gutenberg Changelog podcast and Gutenberg Times, and there's a fullsiteediting.com, which is fabulous. And even makewordpress.org. There's a lot of resources out there to stay up to date on this, but so much is changing so quickly, it is challenging, especially if you're working, you have a day job or you're doing other things. It is a challenge to keep up with. And then, documentation has never been WordPress's strong suit. I mean, you could maybe way back when it was, but for the last couple of years, it hasn't been. And I don't think it's necessarily a dig on anybody. I mean, it's an open source community, requires contributions and whatnot, but the documentation is not where we need to be for someone to step in and learn everything they wanted to know from documentation. And then there's other barriers and hurdles. Because of this increased complexity, it requires, like I spent a good couple months in my nights and weekends learning JavaScript and React. If you're a professional PHP developer who's building things for WordPress and you have clients and you've got deadlines, do you have time to spend doing that? Not always. So the time and the money add additional hurdles and barriers to entry. So there are challenges with modern WordPress development. I'm going to try to set those aside, and we'll move forward by talking about why all this new stuff can be so cool. So we've gotten through the hurdles of learning JavaScript and getting up to speed with all this stuff, all the changes and Gutenberg and the block editor and everything. So what type of projects might we want to pursue when it comes to blocks? And I kind of broke it down into three things. You have block plugins. Those could be individual plugins, or those could be block libraries. Individual plugins, maybe a client needs something really specific. Instead of in the past, you may have built like a shortcode or something. Now you can build a block for them. Block-based themes. This is we're not quite there yet, but by next year we will be. There are a few already. But when I showed you that site editor a few slides ago, you only can use a site editor in a block-based theme. So block-based themes are getting built. There's more and more projects dedicated to building them. And so this is an area that you could direct your development time. And the last one is block-based utility plugins. This is the one I'm going to talk about the most, so I'll kind of skip that for now. But let's just do a quick overview. So block library plugins. If you go to WordPress.org, type in blocks into the plugin repository, a whole bunch will show up. And a lot of them are libraries of blocks. So you install it and you get an accordion block and all sorts of different blocks. And a lot of them are geared towards different themes. If you're a user of the Genesis framework, there's Genesis blocks, there's Cadence blocks for people who use Cadence themes, so on and so forth. Tons of block libraries, a lot of good ones, and they're getting a lot of usage. Quite a bit of them are. Now let's talk about individual blocks. So of course you could build a block, a proprietary block for a client, but there's also, it's kind of just starting now, is the block repository. So what is the block repository? Or sorry, no, block directory, my apologies. The block directory is this kind of a subset of the plugin repository where it's only for plugins that distribute a single block. And why is that important? Well, inside the block editor, there is the block inserter. And so here I just typed in QR code into the block inserter. And sure enough, you see that there's this QR code block by RetroFox. And that's being pulled in because it's part of the block directory. And here you can see the plugin inside the block directory. So I imagine over time, it's kind of debatable, but I imagine over time that this will become a larger repository where people building one-off plugins that you can kind of one-click install directly from the block editor. And then we have block themes. So if you were to go into the theme repository on WordPress.org and you typed in block-based themes, you'll get these. There aren't many more. Currently, the review process for block-based themes is quite arduous, but these are really cool. And if you have some time, I encourage you to check them out. TT1 Blocks is the block-based version of 2021. And there's a lot of cool things that people are building. And I only imagine that this is just the beginning. This is the experimental phase of block-based themes. In the future, there'll be thousands. We're kind of at the precipice of block-based themes. All right, so now I'm going to talk about block-based utility plugins. So what is a block-based utility plugin? So we talked about blocks. We talked about how blocks and full site editing and block themes. A utility plugin, at least to me, is something that doesn't add a block itself necessarily, could, but doesn't. The main purpose is not to add a block itself, but it interacts with blocks and it interacts with the block editor and the site editor. So Yoast is a great one. So yes, Yoast does have a few blocks, but Yoast is heavily integrated inside the block editor. If you are using the block editor and you have Yoast installed, all that Yoast functionality will be there. That's because it's heavily embedded within the block editor. Hence, it's kind of a block-based project. Doesn't necessarily seem like it because it existed before blocks, but they needed to adapt in order to work within that framework. Then you have some other ones, like I love this one here. It's a custom blocks constructor called Lazy Blocks. This allows you to build blocks with PHP, but in order for the developer to build this plugin, it had to be heavily built into the block editor, so it would allow other people to build blocks with just PHP. And then selfishly, we're going to talk about this one here, which is my plugin. But again, there's so many different ways that plugin that doesn't necessarily install a block can interact with the block editor in novel ways. So this is not a sales pitch for my plugin. I just think that I hope you'll find that the process that I went through in building this, because it was very much a learning process in the beginning. I was learning JavaScript. It was kind of a test bed for me to apply what I learned. It might inspire you to build things yourself, or inspire you to install the classic editor and never deal with blocks again. So developing blocks. So let's talk about the concept. So when I was in the hospitality industry and I worked for a resort, we would have events throughout the year, say Christmas or Easter or something. And I would need to present information about those holidays to market on the website. Now, in WordPress or any website, you can just add that content. And then when the event's over, you just take it down. But what if you could just hide it? Because you know next year, or for the next event, you're going to need to add that similar content back. What if you could just hide it and then come back when you needed to, make some changes, and then make it live again? So let's take a look at this concept again. We're on this outdoor adventure demo page. And I want to add a promotional banner right where this arrow is. It might look like something like this. So your ultimate hike adventure awaits. And it's offering you a promotion code and a discount. So great, I created my banner. Okay, well, when this promotion's over, without a plugin, core WordPress, you'd have to delete this, re-update the page, homepage, and then it would be gone. But what if you didn't need to do that? What if you could just hide it? So then when the fall promotion comes out, you could just come in here, maybe tweak the image, tweak the promotion code, and make it visible again. It would really increase workflow. And this is a very simple example. There are much more complicated examples where this is even more useful. So let's think about the requirements here. So we want to conditionally hide a piece of content on a published page without deleting it. We want a single solution that would work with any type of content. So that was a banner, but what if I had a video? What if I had a paragraph, anything? It needs to work with anything. It needs to work with any block, right? Because we talked about all this different content types becoming blocks. This needs to work with any block. And then the solution has to operate within the block editor. I don't want to go to a separate screen in WordPress to do all this, to create my content. No separate interfaces. And then it must be user-friendly and it must be performant. So those are kind of my criteria in starting this. So the first thing I thought of when tackling this problem, a CSS class, right? All you need to do, add this CSS style to your style sheet. And then in the block editor, you can come in here and click on your block, and under additional CSS classes, add hidden, right? We solved our problem. It's hidden, it's within the site editor, and it sort of works, but is it user-friendly? I would say no. Your client, let's say you built this for a client, they'd have to come in here, oh, we add this CSS class to hide stuff. It's also not performant. So if you had this big image and you just hit it, yeah, the public wouldn't see that banner anymore, but that content would still be loaded to the web page, which may make your site slower, especially if you're doing this a lot. So not a good solution. Next option, shortcodes. I had built many of these plugins in the past. You build a shortcode. This is a simple example of a shortcode that has an attribute called hidden. And if the hidden attribute is set to true, hide the content. Very simple. And we can even do this within the block editor. So here we are. I have a shortcode block, hidden, set to true, and wrapping my content. Now, again, it works, right? It's hiding the content. It's within the block editor. But is this user-friendly? I don't think so. I mean, it wasn't user-friendly in the classic editor. I remember having websites with clients where, your shortcodes are just everywhere, wrapping stuff. Also, that's not the point of the block editor, right? It's supposed to be user-friendly. It's supposed to be more what you see is what you get. And so not an option, but definitely something that was heavily employed in the classic editor and in different areas of WordPress. The next one is a custom post type. Now, this is one thing that I've used a lot. I'm sure a lot of you are using a lot. So if you had a type of content like a promotion, maybe you have a custom post type for promotion. Now you can do really complicated, sophisticated development things there. You can, within that custom post type, you can do scheduling, you can do custom fields, all sorts of stuff. And then really sophisticated stuff. And then when it comes to taking that content and displaying it, you'd write a shortcode. And it would look something like this. So I would have my promotions custom post type in a separate part of WordPress. They would give me a little code. I paste it in, and voila, it would be there. Now, this is being used everywhere, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad approach. I'm using a plugin called Easy Digital Downloads to manage, or something similar like WooCommerce, right? If their cart feature for your checkout, generally, it's going to be a shortcode that you're going to paste on your cart page. And then on the front end, it will display the cart. Of course, displaying that as a block is challenging, which is why people quite haven't gotten there. And that's why this type of functionality is very common in WordPress. But that's not what I want, right? It does the first two things, but it's on a separate interface. It's a separate part of WordPress. It's not within the block editor. And I would argue that this is not the most user-friendly. It is performant, but it's not the most user-friendly because the client or whoever you're providing this tool to, they need to know what the shortcode is. They need to copy and paste it. They need to use a shortcode block. Not the best. All right, next option. We're getting closer. Let's build a custom block. Now, I'm not going to go into how to do that. I mean, there's lots of ways to do that, and that's a whole nother talk, but let's build a custom block. And let's call it a visibility group. And here what we've done is in our visibility group, we have some visibility controls, much like any other block in the block editor. When you click on in the settings sidebar, you see a bunch of controls. Now, this visibility group is like any group in the block editor. It's wrapping around all of our inner blocks. So we have our cover block, heading, paragraph, buttons, right? Now, when we check hide block, it will hide the visibility group, which will in turn hide everything inside of it. And that's great. I mean, you could argue that this is a very valuable solution. We're within the block editor. We have a nice user interface for people. It is, it's performant, and it's everything that we want. The bit of a problem, though, is that it's a group block. You're wrapping blocks, so in some cases might work great. But again, we go back to that thought, or the, not thought, but the approach for modern WordPress where everything is a block. So if you're trying to take this approach to, let's say, a navigation block, a link block within a navigation bar, it'd be a little annoying to wrap it in a group block like this. The final step of this is add visibility settings to all blocks, right? We don't need a group. We don't need anything to wrap it in. We just want to apply visibility settings to all blocks. And by all blocks, we mean all blocks, right? And so now I'm on the cover block here, and we have our visibility panel, much like we did with the visibility group, and we have this option to hide it. Again, this cover block is just the cover block. It's naturally including all the things that are inside of it. There's no extra block that is needed for this functionality. So we met all 4 requirements. Now, when I say all blocks, in WordPress now, that means everything. And just look at some of these options. We got post comment form, we got navigation, footers, headers, social icons, audio. I mean, it is truly everything. I mean, we're not quite there yet. There's a lot more development needed in WordPress. There's a lot more, advancements that are needed with full site editing. But this is the vision. If you fast forward in 3 years, I'm using that arbitrarily, but just pretend we're in 3 years, blocks are going to be able to happen. They're going to be everywhere. And so if you can provide functionality to the singular unit, the singular component for adding content, which is a block, you have this amazing amount of power across the entire WordPress ecosystem. So, and then that means, sorry, I forgot this line. That means third-party blocks too. So anybody that builds a block, whether it's a proprietary block for a client, or it's WooCommerce, or advanced custom fields, or whoever it is, that will work as well, because if they're following the spec of building a block the way WordPress requires, all this stuff will just work. So the key to all of this, especially with block visibility, is something called block attributes. So I just want to touch on that real quick. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's worth a read. It's basically, it's the data stored by a block. So a block can contain any number of attributes, and it's the background color, it's the button title, it's all the different fields for a block, and it's stored inside of WordPress. So here we are back on our block editor for that page, and we have dimensions. We're on the cover block, and we have dimensions, and we have the visibility panel. Both of these are attributes. So if we switch on over to the code editor, you can see here that you can, in this top line for the cover block, we have over here, we have dimensions, that min height here of 360. And then we can see I highlighted it here, the custom attribute for block visibility, hide block equal to true. And that's represented in the sidebar panel here. So these block attributes are kind of the key to controlling all the functionality of a block. And the key here is that the spec for attributes is uniform across all blocks. So as long as you're adding attributes in the correct way, you can target any block inside of WordPress. So now we get to extending blocks, right? WordPress exposes, and this is going to get a little bit developy, but hopefully you can follow along, and I'm going to try to make it as straightforward as possible. So WordPress exposes a bunch of APIs that allow you to modify existing blocks. If people are familiar with PHP filters, it's virtually the same. It's in React or JavaScript, but it's basically the same thing. And we're going to talk about 2 of them. The first one is called blocks register block type. You can kind of ignore the funny notation here, but basically this is the filter that's going to allow us to add custom attributes to any block. Then we have editor.block edit. This is going to allow us to add the custom user interface for controlling those attributes. That little toggle that we saw to hide a block, that's what's going to allow us to add that. And then we're back into PHP now, and we have the render block filter. This is a genius filter. Every block in WordPress runs through this filter. And so you can basically, now I'm going to say hijack, but I don't mean to in a negative way. You can modify how any block is rendered by hooking into this filter, this render block filter. And we're going to use all three of these to do conditional visibility. And the last piece that's so awesome is WordPress components. So if I was to, in the past, go out and I want to build a toggle button, right? I need to design that and build that myself or find some external library to build that. WordPress components are an attempt to standardize common components, so you don't have to even worry about building it yourself. You just add the toggle button component, voila, you have a toggle button. We'll talk about that in a second. So let's start with the first step, and that is adding our custom attributes to any WordPress block. And again, we're going to be using the blocks registered block type filter. I've simplified this a lot based out of my core code, but let's walk through slowly about what this is doing. So we've added our filter. The filter's here. We have a name and we have a callback function. And at the top here, there's a parameter called settings. And this settings has everything you'd want to know about the block. The name of it, the attributes that are currently assigned to it, all sorts of stuff. And in this first line, I am using that name to identify the freeform block. The freeform block is basically a container for classic editor, for the classic editor. We don't want to be using attributes in the classic editor. So we're going to remove that piece. But then down here, we have our custom attribute for block visibility. So this is the name of it. It's an object. It has the property hide block, and the type is Boolean, true or false. So this is kind of an abstracted view of what we saw in the code editor, where it just said block visibility, and then it said hide equals true. So this looks complicated, but all this is doing is it's adding this custom attribute. And here we're appending this block visibility to all the other existing attributes that the block might have. So this function will run for every block in WordPress, except core-freeform. So if you wanted to modify the paragraph block, you could just do the paragraph block. But this filter gives you full access to every block, which is fantastic. The next thing we need to worry about is block edit. So at this point, we've added our attribute to every block, aside from the freeform block. Now we need to add the UI in order to do that little toggle switch and the panel so that you can actually control that attribute within each block. Here, we're going to use the block edit. Again, we have a filter, have a name, we have a callback function. This callback function is kind of complicated, so I'm not going to go through it all, but basically what we're doing here is we are editing all the stuff around the block editor, the settings sidebar, you could do toolbars, all that kind of stuff. You're basically editing the edit function for the block. And so what I've done here is I've added my own component called visibility inspector controls. And I know we're getting a little bit deep here, but what the visibility inspector controls component does is it includes the inspector controls component. This is a component that's part of WordPress, and it is, I'm going to mention this here, tune me out if you don't want to hear this. Inspector controls is actually a slot, and it uses slot fill technology, and it allows you basically to inject content within this settings sidebar. Slot fill is fascinating. I actually wrote an article about it on my website, but if you just Google slot fill WordPress, you'll find a lot of interesting articles. It is the method in which you can add content really throughout the block editor. If you're familiar with like actions in PHP, slot fill is kind of how it's being done currently in the block editor. It's truly fascinating. But that's what we're doing here. Just you can ignore that last couple sentences and just recognize that we are injecting or inserting our panel body with the title visibility and the class name block visibility into the settings sidebar. And you can kind of tie 2 and 2 together, right? We have visibility here, scroll down or look down, and we have this hide block set component, and that's going to relate to this piece here. And this hide block component is another component that I have, that I wrote. And when we before we look at that, I talked earlier about components and about how great they were. I really encourage you, if you haven't already, to go check out WordPress-components on WordPress.org and just spend some time reading through it. Again, documentation is not 100%, but it's very useful in terms of getting an understanding of how all this stuff can work. A component is a collection of different functionality that you can just bring right into your project without having to create it yourself. So this is a good example. Button, if you want to create a button. When you pull in the button component from WordPress, it will give you a button already styled to look like the rest of WordPress. You don't even have to worry about anything. You just pull in a button, add a link or whatever you want to do, and you're done. You don't have to worry about styling anything. So it's awesome. So going back here, when we look at the hide block component, you'll notice that there's the toggle control. I think I alluded to this earlier. So I'm pulling in the toggle control, and now I have this nice little toggle that I didn't have to do anything for. I ignore the on change here, the setting of the attribute. So it gives you a little help field, it gives you a title. This color, the color of the toggle is going to match your admin interface, no matter what the person changes for admin. And so using, this idea of these components is just revolutionizing how you build for block editor in WordPress. So now we have our toggle control. At this point, we have created an attribute. We've created the UI for that attribute. We've enabled the attribute on our cover block. And that information is stored on that block in our system. Now, when that block is rendered on the front end, we need to take that attribute into account and conditionally render the block. And we can do that by just using the render block function or filter. So here we have the render block filter. Here's our callback function. All we're doing is it's going to pull in the block content in the block. We're going to look at the block, look at its attributes. Does it have the block visibility attribute? If not, ignore everything. If it does, take a look at the attributes. Is the hide block attribute set to true? If it is set to true, or that's what that's saying there. I'm sorry, reverse of that. I think I have a problem in my code. Anyway, but the point is that if hide block is set to true, you're going to hide, return null, hide the content. If it is set to false, then you are going to return the block content. So as simple as that, we took our attribute, we looked at its value, and then we did a simple conditional. Should we show it? Should we not? That's it. That's it. We're done. So just a quick recap. We registered a custom block attribute. We created UI for configuring block attributes. We rendered the block based on those attributes. And we did this all within the block editor, all within the standard UI for the block editor. And that's it. So all we did in this example is we hid a block. But with this power, these 3 filters, we were given complete control over any block in WordPress. We can do some amazing things. What about configuring a block based on time, scheduling a block? What about restricting block visibility based on the role of a user? What about even getting more fancy and doing things about like post taxonomy? So is the page that we're on a category, and does the category an integration? All of this stuff. And so, I'm going a little bit long here, but my point is that with these tools, now that every piece of content is now a block, including soon to be navigation and widgets and everything, with these few filters, these few functions, you now have access to controlling all of it. So with this little plugin, where that we wanted to hide something. In the past, you'd have to create a one for widgets, hide some widgets, create one for navigation, hide some navigation, create something for the block, for the classic editor, or maybe short codes that would hide stuff. This is a single solution that with just that, we can now hide anything inside of WordPress. And I just find that's fascinating. And so while this was for conditional visibility, you can kind of imagine all the different other things that you could possibly build with this power. Now, I want to end on the fact that WordPress, the block editor, and full site editing has a very long way to go to be as stable and solid, going back to Beth and building sites for clients. I am not somebody who builds sites for clients. I just am building products, right? So there's a lot of functionality after all the years that people built on top of WordPress that likely are not in or capable or built for yet the block editor and full site editing. But it will be. And I think that the tools and the functionality, the capabilities of blocks and all the APIs and everything are only going to get better. And I just wholeheartedly feel strongly that in 2-3 years, building a block is going to be old hat. It's going to be the equivalent of building a short code today. And I just think it's an awesome time, if you aren't already, to start exploring the block editor and exploring building for full site editing, even to start learning JavaScript, even to start learning some of this stuff. They're kind of all over the place, but there are a lot of great resources out there. And I'm always on Twitter, able to answer any questions. I'm still learning as well. But I just wanted to share my little bit of my story in terms of building this product, and just say that if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I do think we're in for some exciting times in WordPress. So thank you for your time. We can either stop there. I can do a quick demo to show this live, but I know we're already at 8:20, so whatever works for everybody.
Well, Nick, I know there's a couple questions here.
Sure.
Before we jump into that, let me see my timestamps here. Glenn, now, of course, this was back at a little bit, but Glenn was asking, how does this affect sites that are developed for mobile devices at all? And that kind of sparked a little bit of the conversation about, I think, mobile first and all that, and how it works with hiding.
Yeah. So, so specifically for the plugin itself, when something is hidden, it is not rendered. So if it is hidden, it does not exist on the page. There are controls within the plugin. Again, I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but there are controls within the plugin that allow you to do conditional visibility based on the device you're on. And that's why you can keep building this out. But I think it's important to talk about mobile responsiveness in the broader perspective of the block editor. It is not there yet. There are no real good responsive controls within the block editor yet. There's a lot of people who built plugins that add that functionality, but it is not there. And I do know that it is top of mind for the project leads for Gutenberg. But I do expect in the next year or so, we're going to start to get some of that functionality, but it just simply isn't there yet. Back to the thing about this is a process, and there's still a long way to go with getting the block editor 100%.
All right, thank you. Also, and this is another question. This is a question from Angel, and it caused a whole flutter in the chat. But he said, "Any thoughts on the new theme.json file?"
Well, I have lots of thoughts.
Careful, we're approaching our limit already.
Exactly. So I mean, it is so far from complete. It's hard to have an honest conversation about it. I mean, it's an experiment at the point. To me, it's an experiment at this point. I mean, there are so many things that aren't included yet, and for good reason. But if you were starting today with no prior knowledge of that, and you jumped into the theme.json file, you'd be like, wait, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? I can do this for this block, but I can't do it for this block. It becomes very confusing very quickly. I think it's a very interesting, if you go into it with the idea that this is we're very new, kind of an experiment, proceed with caution. It's cool, it's great. And I think that, again, a couple of years from now, it's going to be awesome, fantastic. But right now, it's you got to slog through a lot to get it working.
All right. And then Cami asked, can you change the visibility based on device? And there was a little bit of discussion about yes, in some different ways, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the ways that, on websites, some responsive design stuff is based on like media queries. So like as the screen gets smaller based on a media query, something will become hidden. So there is functionality there. Again, that's just a CSS class. If you want to do screen size visibility, there is, again, I hesitate to mention this, but in the premium version of the plugin, there is device control. So you can actually detect if you're on a PC or if you're using Chrome or you're on Internet Explorer or you're using a mobile device, it will actually detect the device, and then you can actually conditionally render content that way. So both ways.
All right. Another question, Leonard, I think. He says, simple question. How can I copy blocks from one page to another? And also says you wanted to say that you had a nice bookshelf in your background.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I can show you how to copy blocks from one page to another. The best thing to do is like, you can just select them and just on your keyboard, at least last time I tried it, you could just Command C, and then just paste them right in. There's a couple of different ways. You can also go to the code editor. I hate to recommend that, and just copy the code and paste it in. If we have time for a demo, I can definitely show that if you get to that point, but there are many.
All right. Oh, and let's see. All right, a couple questions left. Steve says, what is the best crash course tutorial on the JS, React, etc., requiring for building blocks?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I don't know off the top of my head. Like last summer, it was like Code Academy or something. There was one of those online things that has like, dummies guided JavaScript, right? And you kind of walk through it and you kind of learn the basics. Once I got through that and I understood like what a variable was, and like you have to learn, one of the important things for working with Gutenberg and stuff, you should have an understanding of JSX, which is I don't know the technical term, but it's basically a format of JavaScript. And once you kind of know the basics there, I kind of abandoned all standard coursework, right? I just dove into Gutenberg. And so WordPress is getting better about in the documentation, showing you how to build a simple block. There's even some tools called Create Block that is maintained by the WordPress team that allows you to get up and running, building a block kind of from scratch. Because in order to build a block, you need to set up a development environment in JavaScript with JavaScript and all that kind of stuff. So it is a bit complicated, but instead of like going to like a book or going to like a course about JavaScript and React, do that just to get the basics and then turn back to WordPress and focus on the tools that they have. I just felt it was much easier for myself, at least, to learn while doing, as opposed to just learning from a book or learning from a course that had nothing to do with WordPress and was just teaching me all sorts of stuff about JavaScript and React. That was just my own process.
All right. And Rich Tabor has a question. He says, how do you think devs like you can do a better job of informing the global audience of how Gutenberg is coming along?
That's a great question. So I personally feel very passionate about this stuff. And I think that I know that I'm personally going to be doing a better job about just taking what I've learned in this process and just writing more blog posts, putting this stuff out on Twitter more, being more vocal within the community. Because I'll admit, I've been doing this, playing with WordPress since 2012. I have like a single contribution to core, right? I have a couple plugins that I've built. I'll speak for myself. I have the opportunity and the time and the ability to be contributing more. I think that people, it's hard because people have jobs and people have clients they need to take care of and all this other stuff. But I know that I personally am going to be trying to do a better job about contributing to core, like fixing documentation that I find that's wrong, promoting the positive things that are happening with Gutenberg. I mean, there's so much negativity. I tried to stay a bit clear of it, but it's a big change to the WordPress ecosystem. It's a lot of agencies, a lot of people that are heavily invested with huge clients that this is a challenging time. And we need to respect that. But we also, I want to showcase like some of the cool stuff that you can do with WordPress, because that's how we get through this time, by showing that there are some things you can do that are easy and awesome and things you could never do before, but you now can with good.
Right on. All right. Well, on behalf of all the different WordPress meetups that have kind of come together for this mega meetup, we want to thank you and Beth for spending your evening with us and teaching us about project management and WordPress and the power of blocks. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before we have to close everything out, Eddie, did you? We had a 2-minute. Eddie, one of our founding members of our meetup here, wanted to share something really quick for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to close it out with our contest winners.
Great. I should stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing. And I'm going to see if I can unpin you. All right, go ahead, Eddie. Can you hear us, Eddie? Eddie, you might be muted. I can't hear you. Let's see if I can. I'm sorry, I just called you Eddie like 3 times. I've been talking to an Eddie all day. It's ridiculous.
Hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I have too many different headphones and system and they don't talk to each other.
No
Okay.
problem.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So for the ones who don't know me, my name is Esther Sims, or Etty. I am part of the South Florida WordPress community. I helped in the, I was one of the lead organizers for the last live WordCamp for us at 2020, and I'm looking forward to do it again. In the meantime, for stress relief from computer work and web development, all this, I ride my bike. And I do every September. This is the 2nd year that I'm doing. It's a cycling challenge that you pledge how many miles and you get donation, and all the proceeds go to the Children Cancer Fund. And I would like if the WordPress community will help me and support me in the my hold on one second, let me share it in the so I'm going to share the link to my challenge website, and I will be writing in September, so not all at once, but throughout the months of September, 500 miles in the Florida heat to raise money for that. So please contribute. You can join and collect donations and join the challenge. It's really good workout after you sit all day and do WordPress. So that's all I have, and I will appreciate it so much. And I'm actually working on some, I don't know if it's going to show, on some 3D printing that I may be giving away when people donate. So that's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I should have had you at the beginning, but
it's okay. We forgot about it. I get it.
now, speaking of forget, here's the winners for tonight. I just decided because we kind of run out of time here, we did a random pick from the Twitter. So I'm going to read off some names here. We have Philip Levine, we have Bata Dunbar, and we have, and I can't read this, I'm getting too old, Lonnie Wormley? I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong because I am on way too much medication. Lonnie, I got everybody's email but yours, and I've been asking you for the direct through messenger all evening. So either I've missed it or you're playing hard to get. So if you can send me your email, however you want to send it to me, meetup.com, or send it to me over Twitter or DM, whatever. Those are our contest winners for tonight. And thank you very much to, oh, there, he just gave it to me. See, it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard. Thank you very much for those. Thank you for our winners as well. You can look on Twitter and see all their lovely fashionable outfits. Yeah, okay. Decently fashionable outfits. So we want to thank, first of all, let's thank Guy for handling, let's be honest, most of the work tonight. Let's give Guy a round of applause. There you are, Guy. Let's also give applause to our speakers tonight, Beth and Nick. Thank you very much. As well, yes, virtual hand claps. They're much easier on the hands. Thank God for emoji. And thank you to all of you. We're going to have this recording, Guy. If we can drop another link real quick into the YouTube, into the chat. We're going to be posting this probably tomorrow in the YouTube channel. Although we do have a live stream of this up there right now, but unless you're really, really lonely at midnight tonight, why don't you just wait for the video recording tomorrow morning from Zoom, or tomorrow, I should say. We usually, our next WordPress meetup, our mega meetup, is going to be in September, probably a little around the same time, September. If you would like to speak the meetup, you can speak for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, it doesn't matter, especially if you're using like the new site editor or new features in WordPress and you've got something cool to share. And you would like to be recorded doing it and presented, that would be awesome. Please feel free to reach out to either Guy or myself in that, and especially if you went through meetup.com, you can reach us there too, on Twitter, or I'm dbissett@dimensionmedia.com. It doesn't matter. All the spam companies got me anyway. Why not share my email here right now? So thanks again for everything, Guy. Have I missed anything? Guy, why don't you, what meetup group are you from?
I'm the lead organizer for the Southwest Florida meetup, covering Fort Myers, Naples, Bonita, Estero, Marco Island.
Okay, I'm not sure if all those words were made up or not, but yes, that sounds fantastic. And if you are out there listening to right now and you would maybe like to join us in the mega meetup with your meetup, you can kind of almost even host the meetup. Guy or me does not have to host these things. I mean, we just lost a bet and we kept doing it. If you want to be able to host the meetup too, or co-host it and have your meetup be like the featured host of the meetup, let's all join together. We're all doing virtual. We're all in the same collective sea or collective boat, or whatever analogy you want to use. Feel free to reach out to us. Let's coordinate. Let's get new faces, new people, new diversity. And we're still I'm still trying to get meetups from other different time zones that can reasonably make it to our meetup, like from Europe and Africa still. I would love to see a lot more people from a lot more countries and a lot more places in the U.S. Still impressed with all the people that came out here today. So anyway, Nick and Beth will share the slides URLs, and we'll include them in the meetup.com updates and in the description for the YouTube talk that the YouTube video I'll post up tomorrow. So so we'll have links to that as well. And if you want to go ahead and share slides on Twitter when you have a chance and just CC me, I can also spread that out as well. So we'll make sure everybody has a chance to grab those slides. Beautiful slides, by the way. I think this meetup has one of the best slides from our speakers that I can remember previously. And I'm not just saying that because we're running out of categories. But anyway, I think that's it. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody next month. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. I drank a lot of water 3 hours ago, and I think I need to visit someplace other than here right now. All right. I'm going to stop recording. Should have stopped recording before I said that, but yeah, there we go.
Recording stopped.
Yes. So as soon as this ends, it'll download, but it's going to take a while. It usually takes an
Yeah.
hour or two for this thing to process. Thanks to everybody for making it. I think we had some really good content on tonight. I don't know if Beth's still here, but I wanted to thank her too.
Yeah.
And
I have some notes, and then I'll probably try and skim through the. I asked her. I'll skim through the slide or the stuff again.